See, I don't know who has better onions, Consume or the market. But sometimes the Consume is really good and sometimes it's not, but the market is often the same. And also, my friend from the market who sold me vegetables has left, and it's just not the same anymore, which is why I've been going to Consume a bit more than going to the market. But sometimes the vegetables aren't good either place. Hey everyone, welcome back to Chef Tyler's Croatian Kitchen. Today we'll be making čušpajz od Kelja. Continuing from last week with some easier dishes to make, the stew takes only about an hour from start to finish, and most of that time is just letting it cook. So once you cut everything up and put it into the pot, you can go and relax for a little bit before it's time to serve. This is a meatless dish, as čušpajz generally implies that it is meatless, but if you want to add meat, you could add a few pieces of pancetta, maybe some bacon, sausage if you have it, if you like. You can also serve these with pajz, as we made before, to add some meat into a otherwise meatless meal. But if you want to keep it meatless, that's also perfectly acceptable. The main star of today's stew is Kelja, or Savoy cabbage. As you can see here, it's a little bit more leafy than regular green cabbage, and the leaves also have a lot more ridges on it. It ends up having a little bit of a milder and more earthy taste. Kelja to Croatian children is like Brussels sprouts to American children. Nobody likes it as a kid, but you're forced to eat it, and then you grow up, realize you do actually like it, and then force your kids to eat it, and the cycle just repeats and repeats and repeats. Kelja is pretty versatile. It's going to be used here in the stew. You can also make it na lešo. So back in the potato episode, the last one we did was blitva na lešo. So instead of using blitva, you can use Kelja and use that as a side for basically anything that you'd like. Something that I really enjoy, and my friend Mediana does not, probably because she was forced to eat it and has yet to get to that point where she decides she likes it. The other part of this dish is čušpajz. So čušpajz is a variant of stew in Croatian. There are three main words for stew. There's čušpajz, like we have today, varivo, and goulash. Goulash is probably the simplest to explain. It is a stew where the main component is meat. We've done vinski goulash and sekeli goulash. The main stars of those stews were the meat. No one really disagrees with that. Some people claim that čušpajz never has meat. Some people say that čušpajz always has meat, but it's not the star. Others say that varivo is the one that never has meat, while some people say varivo always has meat. Some people will even say that čušpajz and varivo are the exact same thing, and whatever you call it is just a matter of semantics, not ingredients. So I'm just going to take the liberty and define čušpajz as a vegetable stew that has no meat, hence no meat. If you wanted to add meat into this in the form of, say, pancetta, then it would become varivo od Kelja. It's basically the same thing, it just has meat into it. So this is how I'm defining these stews. If you have any disagreements, please feel free to keep them to yourself, because this is my show and not yours. Alright, now that we know what čušpajz is, now that we know what Kelja is, let's get into our ingredients. Of course, we have our Kelja, or Savoy cabbage. We'll discard the adulators, usually like we do with the regular cabbage, and cut them into strips. We have one onion that we will dice, one carrot we will also dice. We have 4 small potatoes. Could use 5 or 6 if you'd like, depending on how many people you're serving for. And we'll cut these into cubes. You might see that my potatoes are a little bit sprouted. That's okay. Just pop the sprout off and peel the potato. You're good to eat. As long as it's not mushy or green all the way through after one layer of peeling, it's fine. We have 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. We're not vampires, use your garlic. We have tomato sauce. We're just going to use about 2 tablespoons. We don't want a lot, we're really just looking for the color and a little bit of the taste. If you want, you can use tomato paste as well, but I prefer to use the tomato sauce. Since this is a stew, we'll be cooking in vegetable stock and seasoning with, of course, the Holy Trinity, salt, pepper, and paprika, and some bay leaves to add extra flavor. Also, we'll be cooking in lard, which is traditional, but if you want, you can use any other oil you'd like. If you really want to keep it meatless or you are a vegetarian, butter is probably the best way to go. Right now, I'm going to go ahead, chop up all the vegetables, and I'll meet you over at the stove. So here we are at the stove. I've already poured about a tablespoon of lard into the pot, and as that's melting, we'll add in our onions, all the onions, get everything in, as well as our carrots. Stir it together. We want to cook this until they soften and become translucent, about 7 minutes. Once the onions have softened, we'll add in our garlic. All garlic in. And we only want to cook the garlic for about a minute until it becomes fragrant. We don't want it to burn. It doesn't taste so good when it's burnt. And once you can smell the garlic, we'll add in our tomato sauce, about 2 tablespoons. If you want to use tomato paste, just let it cook itself a little bit to caramelize before adding in the rest of the ingredients. Then we'll add in potatoes, as well as all of the Savoy cabbage. There's a lot, but it is one, the star of the dish, and 2, it'll shrink down a bit once it cooks. Then immediately add in water. You want to add just enough water so that you just cover all of the vegetables. This is why we added in the vegetables before the water, because how can you know how much water to put in to just cover before they're in there? Need more than this, so I'll just grab some more. After adding in the water, I'll add 1 cube of vegetable bouillon. If you have vegetable stock, I would say use that instead of water. There's an extra there. Let's get it all in and stir everything in together. Probably could have used a bigger pot, but as the kettle cooks down, it'll start to shrink and there will be more space, so just leave it. Use a bigger pot if you have one. While this is coming up to a boil, we'll add in some of our seasonings. Let's do, maybe not that many. Say 4 bay leaves, about a tablespoon or 2 of salt. Not too much now, especially because the bouillon cube has some salt in it. About the same, a tablespoon of pepper. Let's say about a teaspoon of paprika. I'm going with sweet. Maybe a little more. Paprika's good and that'll add a nice color. So I'm going to cover this, let it come up to a boil, and turn the heat down to a gentle simmer for about 30 minutes or until the potatoes have softened. We don't need to add flour because the potatoes will add some starch to thicken the stew. And after everything has finished cooking, we'll take off the stove and it's time to serve. I told you the kettle would shrink, and so the pot still wasn't that small. Still use a bigger pot. That's something you should do. If you make this, don't use a small pot like I have. Use something bigger. But the kettle does shrink. Everything shrinks, so it does end up being okay. That's neither here nor there. This smells amazing. I took some taste for seasoning before. Had to add in basically more of everything. More salt, more pepper, more paprika. But now it tastes good, so it's time to serve. I have my ladle, and let's try to get a good heaping bowl full of everything. All very good. There's some potato. The potato is kind of stuck to the bottom. Not stuck as in they were stuck on, but they stayed along the bottom. So we're trying to get more of that, as well as carrots and onions in here too. But really the star is the kelja. And here we have čušpajz od Kelja. Alright, now let's take our taste for Greg. I want to try to get as much of everything as I can. Some potato and kelja together with the carrot. The perfect bite. What I love the most is that the kelja isn't mushy. It still has a nice crunch to it. The potatoes perfectly cooked through, nice and crumbly, melt in your mouth. Honestly, it kind of tasted like mashed potatoes when I was eating the part. But the crunch from the kelja, we're keeping that in there. I think this just elevates what normal Croatian cooking is. A lot of times Croatian cooks will overcook their vegetables, so everything gets really mushy. And kelja would be, of course, not an exception to that. But this way, it still has a little bit of a crunch. It's not overcooked. It just works perfectly together. The liquid it's in is just packed full of flavor. All of the kelja, all of the other vegetables, the paprika has a hint of like sweetness to it as well. This is perfect. This is the meal that people would make when they were trying to clean out their fridge. There wasn't anything else. They just chuck a whole bunch of vegetables into their pot and you'd have a very hearty stew. gonna go ahead and finish the rest of this, but before that, I'd like to wish you all dobarite.